Frenchie. Welcome to the Crush the Rush podcast. So excited you're here today.
Thank you. So excited to be here.
Yeah, I know. I feel like I always say that we need to record the pre and the post chatter before the podcast because it's always like the most interesting. But it's really fun to talk to another mom and wife in business and really just get an understanding of like how you're doing things and what you're doing. And so our first question is, what does a life priorities based business look like for you right now?
I actually love this question because I feel like it's like constantly recalibrating. So I like that you said right now.
Yeah.
But the thing that's always been like a North Star for me is like, I love working. I actually don't think that I have any like real hobbies. I just have professional hobbies.
I say that too. I'm like, I probably need a hobby.
I probably need a hobby. Like aside from going to the gym and working, that's kind of all I do. But the thing that has always felt so central to me and to starting my own business is actually just this idea that like when my kids have 11 a.m. gingerbread making in their classroom, I want to be able to be there without asking anyone for permission. So I will never default to like how many hours I work or what the perfect like balance looks like from a time perspective. For me, it is the optionality and choices to show up for my kids when I want, on the terms that I want, and when they need me.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I call mine the bus stop dream. And that was to be able to like put my kids on the bus and get them off because it's at such random times. So I think that resonates with our audience a lot. When you think about what that looks like right now, what's something that you're doing to make that come to life?
So super simple. We have a caregiver who helps us a lot, but each week I have one day that I'm picking up one kid and having special time with them. And I have another day that I'm picking up another kid and having special time with him. And so on those days, my day stops at 2:30 and it is like kid time from 2:30 to bedtime. And I really get that moment where I get to give each of my children individualized attention. And that's like a choice and trade-off I had to make, right? There's moments where I fall behind on things. There's moments where I might have to like scale back on plans that I have as a result. But by blocking my calendar, I like make that commitment to myself. Like this is a priority and this is how I'm going to show up and do it.
I want to dig into, you have this really, well, I think it's a cool backstory, but I probably didn't feel cool at the time where something that you did went viral. And I feel like it changed the trajectory of what you do and how you do it. So can you tell us that story?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's June 2020, and I am on a Zoom call with my team. At the time, I was the head of community at The Wing, which was like a big women's community organization. And I'm on a Zoom call. My colleague's like, "Are you okay?" And she said it in like a really pointed way. And I was like,
yeah,
like, no, because it's like pandemic and it's June 2020 and I have a small baby, but also what do you mean? And she's like, "Oh, never mind." And she literally just like fell off the Zoom. So then I'm like poking around. I'm like, why did she ask me that? Only to discover that a former contingent of employees from The Wing where I had worked had created a petition demanding the termination of a lot of people on the team, and my name was listed on that petition. And by the time I opened that up, 12,000 people had signed it. And it was just this moment where I was like, I felt like I was at the peak of my career until that very second that I saw my name. And I was like, where did I go wrong? And also, like, where do I go from here? Yeah. I never thought that I would be like, frankly, significant enough in any way to be like publicly canceled. And so I was like, it almost felt like I was like, who, me? Like, why and how and where, how did I get here? But it really ended up being like the inciting incident to a lot of what I did after. And it was really this balance afterwards of being like, what do I need to learn from this? What can I let go from this? And where do I want to go from here?
Yeah. Yeah. What I know, one of the things that you talk about is that leaning into entrepreneurship, which I'm assuming is what happened after, is actually less scary sometimes and less risky than what a lot of people think. And so I want to dig into this a little more because I get this question a lot. I left my corporate job by choice. Like I wasn't let go. A lot of people are like, are you crazy? Like, how can you do that? And so I'm curious your perspective on what that looked like as you sort of moved into what you do now.
Yeah. So there was a lot of factors that came into it. And one is that I'm married to a chef and he cannot work remotely. He cannot be flexible. Like he needs to be in the restaurant. And when I looked at the landscape of our lives, I was like, to my earlier point, right? I want to be able to show up for gingerbread making. I didn't know about
Yeah.
gingerbread making at the time, but now I discovered that's one of the things. And so I was like, yes, it feels like maybe it's safer to go back to a regular job, but I actually don't know how I can be the mother that I want to be in a regular job.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the dream job. I was at the peak of my career and that disappeared in a snap.
Mm-hmm.
And so why would I ever put myself in a position again to not have that access to be able to build something for myself, something to kind of generate independent revenue? And it's interesting because since I started and I kind of leaned into entrepreneurship and running my own business, I've also started to go back into more corporate work and more consulting work with larger corporations, and I've gotten job offers. And now the thing that I've really evolved to is like, regardless of whether I end up taking a full-time job in a company that I'm really excited about, or if I continue with entrepreneurship forever, I will always have an entrepreneurial vertical because I talk about it as like accordion income. I might decide to scale back on my business, but I never want to like entirely shut it down, because if and when that next job doesn't work out, or if and when I want more flexibility again, I know that I have like this accordion business that I can expand again and generate more revenue from. So to me, that's really like the ultimate safety net is us being able to generate revenue for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. I love the accordion and being able to scale it up and scale it down. I think that's such a great analogy. When you were sort of in this transitional phase, like I'm sure having your name out in the public is interesting to say the least. Like what did you do to like keep yourself going? Because a lot of times I think the beginning phases of entrepreneurship or making a pivot, or maybe it's different than what you're used to, can feel really isolating.
Yeah, I think that it really is. So there were a couple things. One of the things that I realized over time is I feel like there's like 4 key motivators in life. It's like money, status, power. And then what I realized in this moment in my life was revenge, right? I feel like I really needed, and it was almost like revenge to myself. Like I didn't want to prove anyone else wrong, but I needed to prove to myself that I could come back from this, that I could build from this. And I think there's factors that are important to note, right? Like I was lucky to be in a situation where I had the runway to kind of mess around and find out if this was going to work, and to just like dive into entrepreneurship with no guarantees. I think that there are very real factors that I don't want to like ignore in the conversation. But I think that in some ways, I feel like I had to put blinders on. Like if I think about horses in New York City that have blinders, it was like, I knew that this happened and I knew that there had to be a next chapter. And, you know, we talk a lot about being ready or not feeling ready for things. I was not ready at all. In fact, I was terrified. And like anytime I would post anything on Instagram, I was like, are the haters going to come for me? Right. I feel like I spent like a year and a half feeling that way. It was like, but what am I going to do? What's my alternative? To paint myself in a corner in shame and hide there for the rest of my life? Like, no, I can't do that either. And so that was really, it took a lot of discipline, and it took a lot of like suspending reality just to be like, okay, I think that I just need to build the evidence to overcome the mindset blocks that I have.
So I want to lean into one of the things that you talk about, and that is staying close to the money and really understanding. And I think, you know, I was joking the other day in my Instagram stories, and I was like, our healthcare just doubled for next year. And that's my husband and I both work for ourselves. So like insurance is a big conversation in our family. And I think a lot of people will like balk at that and be like, oh, I can't overcome that, or insert whatever the task is. And so I think for us, you know, it's really, really important to know where our money is going, know where our business is bringing in income. And so I know one of the things that you chat about is sort of leaking time and energy, which leads to leaking money. And so I would love to like give us a little insight to what that means for you.
Yes. So when I think about staying close to the money, really this concept came up as a reaction to seeing a lot of people spending a lot of time and energy on work that was not actually giving much of a return. And so I think particularly for people who are starting a new business, what happens is you start to come into the entrepreneurial space, and you're like seeing all these people doing all these things, and you're like, maybe I need to be on Instagram. Maybe I should make reels. Like, I mean, reels were just kicking off when I started so that I remember that very specifically. Do I need a course? Do I need this? Do I need that? And nobody is like stopping to pause and be like, what is the shortest path between my actions and revenue? Mm-hmm. And that looks different over time, and it looks different by business. But let's just say you are a new business owner with 0 people on your list or 100 people on your email list. It is going to be really hard to make any meaningful revenue from a $47 course, no matter how many people you see out there successfully selling $47 courses. Mm-hmm. And so the way that you think about what you sell and how you connect with people and how you market needs to be relevant to the stage of your business, the size of your audience, and what you're ready to deliver on at that point in time. So a lot of times for people who are either higher ticket or earlier stage, it looks like a lot of one-to-one networking and connecting to really start to build those foundations. Then as I see people scale and grow and expand, staying close to the money looks really different because you have more data. And so you might know that in order to have a really successful launch, you need to add 1,500 people to your email list to hit your targets because you've seen a consistent 1% conversion rate over time. I'm just inventing random numbers. So then in that particular case, you're staying close to the money would be like, I am doing everything in my power to fill this email funnel so that I can sell more. But we're always thinking about what is the measurable impact of the work that I'm doing and how closely tied to revenue is that? And when people start to break that down, what it really starts to happen is people are like, wait a minute, I'm doing a lot of stuff that is not doing much for me. And I'm really busy with it. And it's actually taking away from what I would call the real work. And the real work is the money-making work. The work around the work is like, sometimes people are like, oh, I really need to make a reel. And I'm like, are you really going to be growing organically on Instagram? Like, is that your strategy? Because if it is, you do need to make a reel. But if not, is that the thing that's going to make you money versus like an outreach to a potential client or that sort of thing? So that high level is kind of what I think about when I think about staying close to the money. And it's really about pausing to look at what you're doing, looking at where your revenue has come from in the past, and then really thinking about how do I make those kind of revenue journeys shorter and tighter.
Yeah. I mean, if you're listening, those last 3 questions are just gold. And I think my favorite question is, where's your income currently coming from? And I always say, like, well, double down on that. I mean, it could change and it will, but that's like the easiest path to probably your income goal. I'm curious, as you've worked with brands and businesses over the last couple of years, what are you seeing in terms of how they're able to stay focused? Because I feel like that's probably the most important thing we can do at the time that this airs, is like going into the new year, is really try to stay focused on our path.
Yeah. So I think that there's a couple things. I think what I always tell people when they make a plan is that you have to have a plan for how long you're going to stick to your plan.
No, I love that.
Because what tends to happen is somebody starts something and then they're not seeing the results that they want right away. And then they're like, okay, I should change plans. But let's just say you're going into a launch. You can't really know how a launch goes until the end of the launch. And so let's just say it's a 90-day launch. That's going to be the time frame for you to have your learnings. And so I think in terms of sticking to the plan, what's hard is when people feel like they have to make a lifetime commitment to something. But if you know, okay, I'm going to try this, and in 60 days, I'm going to reevaluate, and I know exactly what data points I'm going to look for over the course of those 60 days, that's where you start to feel like you have like a lot more control over what work you're doing, why you're doing it, and how you measure it. And when it comes to measuring, I get really nerdy over this idea of leading indicators versus lagging indicators. Do you know what I mean when I say that? I'm always curious.
Well, I do because I grew up in the corporate space where we talk about that all the time. But if you want to explain it, that would be helpful.
So the way that I think about it is lagging indicators are data points that come to us later in time, but typically our ability to achieve that outcome is we're getting early feedback on whether or not we're on the right path. So to go back to the launch example that I shared earlier, if you know that to hit your launch goals, you need to reach 1,500 subscribers, you need to add 1,500 subscribers to your email list, your leading indicator is going to be the number of people who are joining your email list over the period of time that you're working on that. Your lagging indicator, what comes later, is going to be the actual sales. And so leading indicators tend to be the ones that we have more control over and the ones that are like kind of the levers that we can pull. And then the lagging indicators are like essentially an output of you kind of having the right things in place to kick you off. But what happens a lot is that people are essentially only looking at their lagging indicators, and then it takes like 6 months to have any feedback loop going. And then you get like halfway through a year and you're behind on your sales and you feel like a failure and you're like, maybe I just suck at all of this, rather than giving yourself the data points earlier to guide you and to keep you moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I love this. I always say I have the patience of a gnat. And it's so interesting because right now we're testing a new funnel, and it's slow to test. Like, you have to get people in it, and then you have to tweak it, and then you have to look at the data. And so I feel like we have the leading indicators, but I'm waiting on like, okay, well, what's going to happen? And I want to know like right now. And I think a lot of times people forget that it takes time to like go through your process, or for people to learn about you, or to accept what you're doing. I want to sort of like tie this together. And that is, you went from sort of a like publicly awkward situation, we'll just call it, to really leaning into something that you're really great at. And that is strategic planning and helping clients grow and scale their businesses. How did you like pivot with confidence and get to where you are now?
Yeah. So I don't consider myself a naturally confident person. I actually consider myself like a naturally pretty hesitant person. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I realized over time is that confidence is something that, like, this is going to sound really obvious, but confidence is something that grows. And then when I think about how do I grow confidence, it's actually by creating, again, back to data points because I'm a nerd, like creating the data points to disprove my lack of confidence, right? So it's very easy for me to go out into the world and be like, I don't think I'm very good at that, or I'm not sure if I like, am the right, maybe I'm not good enough at my job, or not good enough as a consultant or a coach or what have you. And then what I actually really started to do was writing down, like collecting thoughts of great feedback that I got from a client, a friend who just, happened to be talking to, being like, you give really good advice. And so I really almost had to make like a directory of reminders that like, I can do this, and that I have a positive impact on people. Because as much as I always would want to find my confidence internally, sometimes I just need like a reminder from the outside. And so that to me was just a really helpful way of like anchoring back into like, it's not all bad, even if there were parts of like choices that I made along the lines of like or during my corporate work that maybe I'm like, oh, maybe I would have done something differently today. That doesn't mean that like I'm worthless or, no good or don't have anything to add. But it was very hard for me to kind of anchor myself in that and believe that until I started to collect new data points of where I was shining and where I was having that positive impact. So that's really been helpful to me along the way.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. I do the same. And sometimes I feel like it points me to what my next step is. Yeah. So like a lot of times people say like, oh, you're a good interviewer. And I was like, oh, well, maybe I should do something more with a podcast, or maybe I should, insert whatever the thing is as an example. And so I think if you consistently get like the same feedback, like sometimes it's like guiding you maybe to what your next step is.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think that's right. I think that's right. It guides you to your next step. And it's like, sometimes you have to, like, in the same way that when you're building products or offers, you need to listen to your audience. When you're building your own sense of self and your own identity, it's two-sided, right? Where there's inputs and we're taking those in and we're processing where it's helpful to us.
Yeah. So through this experience and also growing your own business, what is one thing that you've learned about leadership or entrepreneurship that you think people don't talk about enough?
I love this question. So I think there's two parts. I'm going to talk about leadership and then I'm going to talk about entrepreneurship.
Okay.
On the leadership side, I think one of the things that I didn't realize until after this whole public canceling situation is that I went into work every day, right? Like, speaking of confidence, I went into work every day feeling very insecure, feeling like I had very little power and feeling like I had very little impact. And I assumed that everyone else felt that way about me. But what I forgot is that there were more junior people on the team who actually saw me as someone in a position of power. And so I had a stronger impact on them than I realized because I didn't feel powerful. And so that has really shifted how I think about leadership and how I show up in rooms in general, because I'm always much more aware of what are the dynamics of this space? Where is there a mismatch in, not even status, that's not the right word, but like in power or, assumed power. And how can I make sure that just because I see myself a certain way, I'm also able to see myself in the eyes of someone else? Mm-hmm. So that on the leadership side has been like really transformative for me, because I feel like I've built a lot more empathy, because just because I feel insecure doesn't mean I always lead with my insecurity. So that's been super, super key. And then I think on the entrepreneurship side, I mean, honestly, the biggest thing is like, it's a roller coaster, and the good times will slow down and the bad times will speed up.
Yeah.
And you have to persevere if you want it to work. Yeah. And that doesn't mean burning out. That doesn't mean working all the time. Like, it has nothing to do with that, but it has to do with showing up day after day, even when you're not sure what the outcome is, even when it feels like you are in a dark tunnel and you are not sure where that next step is taking you. But like, you have to keep going. And the more you can do that and the more consistent you can be with it, the smoother your results. And like I said, it's not about speed. It's not about quantity. It's about repetition.
Yeah, I would also argue that every entrepreneur probably has the petition story. Maybe it's not as extreme, but we all have the story of it didn't go as planned, or it didn't work out the way we were supposed to. What would you say to yourself now after sort of navigating through and growing to where you have today?
It's interesting because somebody recently put me in touch with someone who had a similar situation, and she was like, do you have some advice for her? And so I had like a long conversation with her. And I think my biggest takeaway is that everything in life is like a lesson or a gift. And sometimes it's both. Mm-hmm. And you have to really parse through to be like, what is the lesson here? And what is the gift here? Mm-hmm. And so the gift for me was really a different sense of self and learning new things about how I interacted with the world and learning new things about leadership. And the lesson was really knowing, like I said, right, the impact that I can have on people, even unintentionally.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to ask you some quick rapid fire questions, and we're going back into strategy here because I know you and I have a very strategic brain, and I'm curious, as we sort of go into the new year, what is like something from a strategic growth perspective that you're seeing that you really like?
Right now, I think intentional relationship building is just working super well. Mm-hmm. And no matter how strong your digital marketing arm is, and like, you have to keep doing that, you should always have a relationship pipeline that you're nurturing and you continue to build.
Yeah. I love that you called it a relationship pipeline. To me, that just tells me that like we should always be feeling it, which is great. What's your favorite thing about living in New York City?
Walking everywhere, being able to like walk out of the house and just get a coffee and not needing to get in a car.
That's like my dream. I always tell my husband, but then I also want like 20 acres where nobody bothers me. So I don't know how you do both. I love that. And then last but not least, what is one belief that you had to let go of to become who you are today?
I think I had to move into thinking like, why not me? Right. Mm-hmm. I think that there was a lot of times that like, why would I ever be successful? Why would I ever stand out from a crowd? Why would I ever be able to build my own business? And I had to really shift that into like, why not me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. I feel like there's so many questions I could ask about your experience and how you built your business. If you're listening, I know you have a really cool resource that's a free weekly accountability check-in, which I love. Yeah. Accountability is so important. So tell everyone what that is, where they can find you, and where they can connect with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So my weekly accountability check-ins are in my emails. So sign up for my email list to get those check-ins. And you can find me, I'm mostly on Instagram, and I'm always open to messages, conversations. My favorite things are voice notes and just hearing kind of what you're working on, what challenges you're facing. So feel free to connect and reach out.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Frenchie. You have such an inspiring story. And I hope that it motivates all of you listening to trust the pivot and to take the next step. So thank you.
Yeah. Absolutely. Of course. My pleasure. Thank you, Holly.